everybody, welcome to Gravity TV, and in this episode I'm sitting down with Chris and Bree, and we're talking about how you can invest in your faith.
Chris, Bree, so glad you guys are here with me tonight. Before we get going talking about the subject at hand, I thought it'd be fun to do a little lightning round questionnaire. So the people out there, the people in the world, they can get to know you guys.
All right.
Okay, let's do it. And here's what I want you guys to do. We're gonna ask Bree the question, and you're gonna answer what you think she would say, and you're gonna tell him if he's right or wrong. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Her favorite restaurant.
Shiki sushi.
Right.
Woo! If she could travel anywhere in the world tomorrow for 1 week, where would she go?
Greece.
True.
Dang. Okay,
Easy. Too easy.
Okay, last one. Last one would be this. What is her ideal date night? Like one thing, one activity. What's her favorite thing to do together as a couple?
Target run.
What were you gonna say?
I don't know. It's a hard question.
We're gonna give you 3 points for that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now we're gonna flip it around, and we're gonna ask. We're gonna ask for Chris. What would be his favorite meal? Not restaurant, but meal.
He loves sushi.
Wow. Copycat.
Is that right?
I mean, it is right.
Okay. No, that would be way too obvious. What is Chris's favorite movie?
You know the answer to this one.
I don't know.
The answer is I don't have favorites of anything.
So maybe that's actually a pretty good answer.
Yeah, because I don't know because he doesn't have
But
one.
you know that that's always the answer.
Well,
for
whenever
favorites.
whenever somebody asks me that question, or if he tries to trick me and we're driving in the car and he's like, "What's my favorite this?" Puts me on the spot. I'm like, I don't know.
That's true. That's very true.
It's
Okay.
a trick question.
I don't have favorites.
If Chris could go anywhere on vacation for 1 week in the world tomorrow, where
He'd
would
go to
he go?
Greece.
Greece?
Yep.
You
We're
guys
on the
are
same page on that one.
You guys are meant to be. Okay, so now that everyone knows a little bit about you guys and they know that you guys are actually compatible, that's pretty good. We're going to talk about tonight investing in your relationship with God. And I kind of liken it to this idea of like when, some people when they turn 16 years old, they get a car. But not every single person has the same car. But we all have to like take care of it and, like fill it up with gas or it's not going to run properly. And the same goes like with our relationship with God. So what did your guys's, and maybe we could start with you, Chris, what did your relationship with God look like in high school, growing up in general? Was it a healthy relationship with God? Was it a negative experience? What did that look like for you? Yeah.
So for me, I grew up going to church. I was a Christian pretty much my whole life, went to Sunday school, all that. I was always really involved. In middle school and high school was when I started getting more involved on my own rather than just like with my parents or whatever. So I started, attending small groups, serving at church, playing on the worship team, things like that. And I noticed that really once I began to make my faith my own, that's when I began to get to know God and grow in my faith more. But one thing I realized in high school was for me, a lot of it had to do with image. And sometimes I noticed like my intention wasn't necessarily right. Like I wanted to be on stage on the worship team to be seen, not necessarily to praise God, or I wanted to be, in the small group with the coolest small group leader because like I wanted to be known of, being their student, but not necessarily because like I really wanted to learn from them. So I would say that in high school, like my relationship with God had started to grow, but I really was kind of selfish about it, if that makes sense. And a lot's happened since then. I've kind of gone through some good and some bad times, but I think the most important thing is like now investing in God is a lot more personal and a lot less public. And that's kind of been the key for me.
No, that's really good. Bree, what did it look like for you in high school, like your relationship with God?
Yeah, I didn't really know God in high school. And the extent of my relationship with God was honestly like going to church or like youth events for the social aspect. And that's kind of where it ended for me. I think I had like a deeper desire to know God, but I didn't know how to go about that. And then I just didn't go about it. I didn't invest in that, and I didn't, it wasn't a priority in my life.
No, yeah, I think that's helpful to know, because I think sometimes like people could look at, you guys are both leaders in the youth ministry, and they could look at, your faith or, something like that and go, man, I'm not where Bree is, or I'm not where Chris is with this or with that. And they can get discouraged, but they don't realize like it's actually taking investment in both of you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask you guys this: what does it look like to invest in your relationship with God? And I think for everyone, they could answer that differently, but just in your life, what did that look like for you to get to that spot where like God started doing things in your life that you once struggled with, but you saw breakthrough in? Yeah. What did it take to invest in your relationship with God? What did that look like?
Well, I think there's a few like kind of basic general good answers for everybody, but then I also think there's some specific times in your life where certain things are better than others, or really you have to dive in a certain way, and I'll kind of explain what I mean. Like I think that generally learning the Bible is a good thing to do. I think that generally having time in prayer is a good thing to do. I think that generally serving the church and people and doing good deeds, those are kind of three general recommendations for everybody. I mean, if you're going to invest in your relationship with God, those are kind of the big three. You have to know who God is and what he did. You have to spend time with him, and then you also have to like let that flow into other areas of your life and give to other people. But I think that there's certain times where something might be more impactful than others. So in my case, there was a time a little over a year ago, like a year and a half ago, and your dad actually preached a message about the Lord's Prayer, and I felt moved by that. And at that point, I didn't really have much going on in my prayer life. I wasn't very consistent. And I started praying the Lord's Prayer every morning on my way to work. And it was like really simple at first, just a few minutes. It's a pretty short prayer. But then that began a habit for me of talking with God every single morning and starting my day that way. And in that season of time, that was what I needed the most, definitely. And I wasn't reading my Bible as much in that time. I was spending more time in prayer. But so I think it kind of ebbs and flows. But I think generally like those three things is how you would invest in your relationship.
That's super good. I love that, because I think people want to hear specifically what helped you in whatever season, because the three general things you mentioned, I think are really good, but I think like kind of everyone knows that in a sense. So yeah, Bree, for you, what would be one thing that helped you in investing in your relationship with God to really make it your own? Because you spoke about in high school how it wasn't really existent. You kind of would go to certain things just for like the environment or the relationship. Yeah. But what helped you invest in a relationship with God to where it became real and practical for you?
Yeah. So for me, I think it was really when I became to know God and who he is, and then started coming to church and started listening to worship music, and like the worship music that I'm listening to would come alive from like the scripture that I'm reading, and it would just make sense. And through reading my Bible and through just spending alone time with God, and through coming to church and like hearing messages and sermons and illustrations about who he was and who he is, it made who God is as a person and who Jesus is come alive to me. And then it just connected in all areas of my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think, if someone's struggling with prayer, they never feel like they've been good at prayer, maybe do what Chris did and pray the Lord's Prayer every single day, or really dive into some worship music and fill your mind and your thoughts with like things that are about God. And that, I think that's beautiful. Last question for this Gravity TV episode would be, what's been the biggest lie or excuse that you've believed, you've told yourself, that has stopped you from really investing in your relationship with God? I think the reason I wanted to ask you guys both this was because I know for me, I have grown apathetic and indifferent many times in my life towards God, because I'm not actually I'm not watering that seed in my heart. And there might be people who are watching this who feel that way. And usually that's because of some false pretense. So what would be for you guys a lie or excuse that you believe that kind of kept you from really growing in God?
Yeah, I think for me, there was times where I felt overwhelmed, And I'll explain that, meaning like I would see somebody's life who I looked up to, and I wanted to have a life like that. I wanted to love God the way they did, be wise the way they were, give the way they did, things like that. But I felt like I am so far away from being that person. Like, how in the world do I ever get from point A to point B? Like, how do I get from the person I am now to the person that I want to be, the person that I, want to look back and be proud of and things like that? I'm like, man, I'm just so vastly far. And what really helped me overcome that sense of feeling overwhelmed was just taking one step at a time. And, you have to know that it's not going to be like a 1-day process or a 1-week process, or, there might be a moment at a camp where you like a camp or a service where you're like, man, God like really touched me, and that's amazing. But I think most of the time it's every day, just taking a few minutes to invest in your relationship with God, and every day just taking one step closer towards the person you want to be and taking one step closer towards a better relationship with God. And so for me, I kind of had to be like, you know what? If I spend time with God sometime today, that's a success. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to do it all at once, but I'm going to make progress. And when you do that, then you'll look back in a month, a year, a few years, and you'll be like, wow, like God has really done a lot, with just the little bit of time that I gave him. So that was one thing for me.
Oh, that's super good. Bree, what about for you? One lie or excuse that kind of held you back?
I feel like for me, I have always had this reoccurring thought of follow with me. I've always had this reoccurring thought of there are so many people in the world, and I'm just one of them. And I think I view God as too small sometimes. And I think it's something that I've always kind of struggled with, and I still struggle with sometimes, to be completely honest. And so I think that's probably the biggest lie. I feel like I'm like, okay, there's so many people, how can God see just me? And it's just such a lie, because he does care about me. He is in the details of my life. He's with me in the big and the small, and he delights in me, and he wants to spend time with me, and he wants me to pursue him, and he's always there. But sometimes I just get so distracted, and I can even compare sometimes, well, he's doing that in their life, why isn't he doing that in my life? But the truth is, he's just waiting for me to press into him and to pursue relationship with him. And he's always there, and he's always faithful. And when I do press in and recognize that lie of he's so big, and he's so close to me, and he's near to me, and he is my closest friend, and he does really care for me. I think that's when I'm okay, God, you are mine, and I'm yours.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Chris, Bree, thank you guys so much for sharing tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, right after this, we're going to be going live on Instagram on our Gravity Youth account at GravityYTH, and we're going to be giving away some DoorDash and stuff like that. So it's going to be pretty good.
Maybe from Shiki Sushi.
Maybe from Shiki Sushi. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to smash the subscribe button.
Smash that like button.
Smash all of it. We love you guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.